Would the Dallas Cowboys pick Tyler Linderbaum, the center from Iowa, if he was there at pick number 24? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And today I am joined by Landon McCool. As always, you can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, let's start with this. I've been looking at some of the recent draft rankings from the biggest draft media members out there. Tyler Linderbaum is falling. I remember earlier in the draft process, he was a top 10 player for most people. Now he's not even a top 16 player for most teams or for most draft media members. If he were there for the Cowboys at 24, do you think this is an automatic run to the podium type of pick for Dallas?
I don't know anymore. I think value wise in the player, I think I would love to have him, but there's the conversation around Linderbaum is not about his talent. It's not about his ability to play the position. It's about his size and about where he fits in certain offices, specifically in what kind of certain run games you're running. Mm-hmm. And people keep coming back to the idea that he's kind of a zone scheme center only. And if that's the case, and if teams really view him that way, the Cowboys maybe at one point kind of consider themselves to be a zone team only, but they have so much variety now in their run game. And frankly, some of the best games that they had running the football were when they were relying on the kind of versatility of the run game to run, the kind of constraints against the zone and running some power and some man. So my answer is, I think that the Cowboys a few years ago definitely could have said, hey, this is a guy that we can take. This is a guy that will fit our system. We'll run a bunch of zone. He'll be perfect for that. Now that they are doing a little bit more of a variety of stuff, I don't know if that is something that they're willing to kind of give up on to make it work for a kind of undersized center. I'm not discounting that I would want him. I just think that it's something that the Cowboys need to consider more than they probably had in the past, since they're kind of varying up their run game a little bit more.
All right, there's so many different directions that we can take this. Let's first start with this. They've really been going, I don't want to say away, but they've been using less zone stuff since Callahan left, and was that 2014 after the 2015 season, right?
Yeah.
Around that range, right?
That's right.
They're really a multiple style rushing attack. And if that's the case, maybe Tyler Linderbaum isn't an option because he's only 295 pounds. Can you get away with him being your starting center if you do plan on being multiple?
I think it becomes a little bit more difficult just because of the kind of tasks that you're asking Linderbaum to do. I mean, you're not just asking him to, snap, get off a double team, and then get to the second level and take on a linebacker, which is something that, you kind of want an undersized lineman for, right? To kind of assist a guard, get off, and then be athletic enough to kind of get to the second level and cause havoc around guys who are much more athletic than you. The issue comes in when you're asking him to, deal with a nose tackle one-on-one. You're asking him to kind of come around on like in a power situation and take on a defensive lineman on the edge.
Do you worry about that in this division though? Because they don't really have nose tackles in the NFC East, right?
They don't have nose tackles, but they do have big, strong defensive tackles all throughout the NFC. So
between Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen and Fletcher Cox, and I guess Dexter Lawrence is a true nose tackle, but I don't really know how the Giants plan on using him going forward. But you're right; they have some powerful defensive tackles in this class in the division.
And it's one of those things where it's like, even if they don't necessarily deploy it all the time, I mean, if it's a problem for Linderbaum, I mean, look out for it. It would
Yeah.
definitely be something that you would see more of an uptick of. And all of this is kind of playing to the assumption that Linderbaum can't handle that. And I don't even know that that's necessarily true. I just think we're talking about draft stock. So we're not talking about necessarily what the player can and can't do. We're talking about what the perception of what the player can and cannot do is. So that's why you're seeing a lot of these boards with Linderbaum kind of falling down and down, is because they're looking at this guy. They're making the assumption, hey, this guy can't handle nose tackles. He can't necessarily handle a power run game situation as well as he can handle his own. And then they're looking at their list of teams. They're like, well, how many teams still run full zone blocking schemes?
7,
So,
8
and
at most.
That greatly decreases the number of bites at the I don't know what the analogy was
Apple,
for. The bites of the apple. There you go. That this player's going to get. And so when you start doing that, you start lining him up, and you're like, well, he's not going to get picked here. He's not going to get picked here. This guy's too high. This guy's too low. Then you start to look at his draft stock, and it starts to fall because he just doesn't have the opportunity to be drafted by as many teams as, say, a athletic offensive tackle. That's kind of scheme agnostic. It's very particular teams that may be looking out for Linderbaum. Now, the reality of that may be that it's not, that none of this is true, and we're all just projecting this on him. But that's what we're looking at when we see the stock, is that these guys are talking to teams and they're seeing how they feel about someone like Linderbaum. And a lot of these teams are probably just like, you know what, we're going to let other teams draft him because we're just concerned about whether he's a good fit for our offensive system.
And then there comes a conversation like, how do you value a center anyways, right? If I'm talking about pure center, because there's been other centers that have come out that had kind of the position flex to play guard or center. That's just probably not the case for Linderbaum, right? I mean, he's going to be a center his entire career. I really don't see him playing another position. So even if he was a clean, quote unquote, clean center prospect, is that even worthy of a top 20 pick in the NFL? I don't know.
It's a fascinating conversation, honestly. I mean, just because he's such a scheme-specific center, which is kind of a very oddly valued position depending on scheme and how you use your center. So it's an interesting test case in draft value, right? Because it's a very niche situation. It's an undersized center. And again, center probably being one of the more wildly valued positions. And you probably talk to 12 different teams and they're going to give you 12 different answers of where they value them in the hierarchy of position groups. And again, like, he's incredibly good. So his tape is incredible to the point where literally the only downside you're hearing from most folks is that he's undersized. So I think it's a fascinating test case in exactly how the process kind of goes with these sort of players who are, very, very talented if put into the right position. But the question is how many teams can provide the correct position to make this guy kind of thrive.
And I even think about like Creed Humphrey last year, who tested as like an all-time great athlete. At the center position, I believe a perfect 10 and the relative athletic score.
That's right.
Went to the Senior Bowl and dominated, right? Maybe the best offensive lineman there. Had 4 years of tape at Oklahoma, and he still went at the end of the second round, right? And he had great size too, so size wasn't an issue.
I mean, he checked all the boxes.
He checked every box.
Yeah, like if Creed Humphreys is going at the bottom of the second round, then what are we doing? And honestly, like, I don't think that we should, I don't know that we should look at the mistakes made by teams drafting overall and view them as certainty for value of the position. Because I think a lot of teams probably, like we do, look at that situation and said, Creed Humphrey shouldn't have fallen to the second round or to the bottom of the second round. Like, so I wonder if there aren't some teams that are kind of going to compensate the other way because they felt like what happened with Creed Humphrey was just not correct.
All right, really quickly. Here's all the centers to go in the first round over the last couple of years. Cesar Ruiz from Michigan, pick number 24. Garrett Bradbury, pick 18 to the Vikings in 2019. Frank Ragnow, center for the Lions, pick 20. Billy Price, center for the Bengals, pick 21. That was a bad pick. Ryan Kelly for the Colts at pick 18. Then you had Travis Frederick at pick 31, Marquise Pouncey at pick 18, Alex Mack at pick 21, Eric Wood, pick 28, Nick Mangold, pick 29, and Jeff Fain at pick 21. That is every center drafted in the first round since 1999.
And that's not a terrible list. I mean,
No,
you know,
but the
like
hit rate is good.
The hit rate is good. Like that's the thing about it, right? Is that like, I mean, all of those situations except for maybe Billy Price and I mean, I can't really think
that's
of another
really
one
it.
that
I mean, but you're
terrible. Yeah.
But you're looking at none of those guys. Not a single
Yeah.
one was drafted inside the top 17 picks.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe the bottom half of the bottom quarter of the first round is kind of what you're looking for you know, a surefire center.
Sure.
And if that's the case, I mean, you know, look, if Garrett Bradbury is able to get drafted by the Vikings in the first round, and you know, he didn't light the world on fire, but he's a very good player for them. It was a fit. I think this is comparable to him. I think he's a better player than Bradbury is.
Yeah, I would agree. Bradbury also went to that Kubiak scheme, right?
Exactly. I mean, Bradbury is the best comparison because Bradbury went to the Kubiak scheme, played in the zones blocking scheme. Like that's why I think that's a very good comparison. Except for the fact that I think he's better than Bradbury.
The other difference is there's a 16-pound weight difference between Bradbury and Linderbaum, and Bradbury was considered undersized, 30th percentile for centers in weight.
He certainly was. I mean, it's certainly he's certainly undersized. There's no way around that.
And I think the size is going to scare a lot of teams. And the fact, if I had to bet right now, and if Bet Online was offering odds right now, I probably would bet that he's available for the Cowboys right now at pick 24. It's just, do they take him? Honestly, my gut says no because of a couple things. Like, I think they want to be able to be more multiple, as you mentioned. And Jerry Jones has talked about like, hey, we can't have first-round picks on every single spot on the offensive line. It just doesn't make sense, right? Like, we're eventually going to have to develop some of these guys. I mean, we're going to talk about a mock here in a little bit where the Cowboys have a chance to take a round one offensive lineman. But at some point, Landon, they've got to develop non-first-round offensive linemen, correct?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that the other thing too is that, you know, again, whenever we have these conversations, you're kind of having it in a vacuum. Like, oh, if he's there at 24, do you take him? Well, who else is there at 24?
Yeah. Well, because
that's going to make a big, huge difference too.
Yeah, let's save that because I want to talk about that in a little bit in just a second. But before we get to that, I want to tell you guys about Built Bar. This time of year, almost everybody has given up on their New Year's resolutions, but not us this year because we are eating healthier thanks to Built Bar. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and they only contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, but 17 grams of protein. Compare that to your favorite candy bar, which has 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. There's also so many great flavors of Built Bars, including mint brownie, coconut almond. I like the coconut brownie chunk. And the new flavor this month is white chocolate cookies and cream. They are all delicious, and they have new flavors coming out all the time. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your next order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, it is a mock draft Monday, and we're going to get to that in just a second. But I have to ask you a question. So I was reading an article this morning from DallasCowboys.com about the Cowboys' need for a fullback. Some of the writers over there believe that in order for the Cowboys to get back on track as a run team, they need to have a fullback. And they presented the argument back in 2012 and 2013. They had Tony Fiametta. They've always had, back in the 90s, they had Daryl Johnston. This is a team that didn't really have a fullback last year. Do you think that's what the Cowboys need to get back on track in the run game?
Well, let's first say that, I mean, first of all, even back when Tony Fiametta, I mean, man, really pulling it back. Like, I mean,
he was good. I like Tony Fiametta.
I know, I had no problem with Tony Fiametta. Just, I mean, calling the way back machine. I mean, why not bring up Cricket Anderson while you're at it? I mean,
that's a good one. I see Richie Anderson was always my favorite fullback.
But Richie Anderson, again, see, this is the conversation we need to have, right? Like the problem is that Daryl Johnson is not the same fullback as Tony Fiametta. Like, these are all very vastly different players.
They are.
And I think that's the other thing is that even when Tony Fiametta was the fullback, the Cowboys didn't use him very much. It wasn't like they availed themselves, and Tony Fiametta was just laying down tracks for I don't even remember who the running back was at that point. It was probably
Fiametta was DeMarco Murray.
DeMarco
Murray. Yeah.
So I think that it's one of those things where I don't think it's like the necessary missing piece for why the run game, wasn't working. There's definitely huge swaths of time where the Cowboys' run game was just fine without a fullback. Having said all that, I think that there is incredible value if you can find a versatile guy who can give you those kind of looks, that you can run those kind of plays, and then also can give you value as a pass receiver, as a guy who can carry the football, as just kind of a jack of all trade that kind of help mess with defenses formationally when you line them up. Look, I mean, I think that they should, be looking into more two-back sets in general. I don't know if that means necessarily a fullback. I don't know if that means an uptick in using Zeke and Pollard on the field at the same time, and kind of using Zeke more as a super back, right? Like as a kind of a transitional fullback, move around guy who can do some stuff. But I think that there is value in the offense overall using more two-back sets because I think of the personnel that you can kind of get aligned that way. So I don't know that you necessarily need to bring back the kind of bruiser, guy who's going to clear out a defensive end. I think, honestly, I was excited, and I still am excited to see what someone like Seo Alanalua is going to do. A guy who is a very good athlete, who if he can develop some blocking skills, and is also a threat himself with his hands in the football. So I think that position, I obviously have strong beliefs in that position, and I think it's important for what the Cowboys want to do. But I don't think it's like necessarily a prerequisite to getting the running game back on track.
Yeah, I mean, I think that fullback is really just a tight end that's a little bit undersized or oversized. You're right, the sawed-off tight end, right? They probably need somebody like that can play in the backfield and can be an H-back and can do all that kind of stuff. And I mean, they just didn't have that guy on the roster. You know how much I love Sean McEwen. He isn't it. Jeremy Sprinkle is not athletic enough to do that kind of stuff anymore, right?
Those guys are all tight ends. I mean, you can line them up in the backfield. It's just not the same, though,
They need a guy that can go in there and dig out a linebacker. But again, that's not my biggest issue with the run game. It's just they didn't block well. I don't think suddenly pick whatever fullback you want from any team is suddenly going to make the rushing attack better. I just think they need to be more creative, and they've got to block better. It's really that simple.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think even the Cowboys guys mentioned Kyle Juszczyk as a reason that the 49ers run game was working. Guys, I mean, that's not why the 49ers run game was working. I mean, it was a very well designed and very well executed scheme. I don't think the presence of Kyle Juszczyk, who didn't even play a ton of snaps necessarily for them all the time. So, I think, and I'm as big a fullback believer as there is, trust me. But I think that if anything, we need to stop limiting that position to only that role. And I mean, you need somebody who can do that kind of thing, but then at the same time, you need somebody who can also flare out and catch a pass on a wheel route, who can, run a Texas route, who can take the ball and pick up a 4th and short if you need him to. I think, and then play a bunch of special teams. That's the kind of position I'm looking for a fullback, a special teams ace who can be kind of a Cedric Wilson in the backfield, if you will. When you need them to kind of just fill in a bunch of different roles as a tight end, as a running back, as a fullback.
I've got a running back for you, or excuse me, a fullback you need to watch in this year's class that might be able to do that. Seriously, there's one in this class, Connor Hayward from Michigan State. It's actually Cam Hayward's little brother. If you watch the game against Michigan, and I know you've been watching that for a different show that we're going to do later this week. He has a heck of a game in that one, digging out the Michigan linebackers. I think you'll like him quite a bit. So there's a homework assignment for any of you fullback fans out there. Connor Hayward at Michigan State. I think you'll like him quite a bit.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I mean,
there's not a ton of these guys.
We get maybe one of these guys in every draft, maybe.
Yeah.
So listen, they're hard.
Or you got to build your own, based on parts from him playing another spot. Yeah,
this might sound blasphemous, but it's harder to find a good fullback than a franchise quarterback. There's just more franchise quarterbacks out there than fullbacks.
Well, everyone wants to play quarterback. Fullback is a position.
Well, there's a little bit more money involved in that position too, right?
Yeah, that's probably so.
All right, one more quick break to tell you guys about Bet Online. Football might be over this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all of the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next coach fired is going to land, betonline.net is the number one spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Mock Draft Monday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And this mock comes to us from our good friend Eric Crocker at the Locked On NFL Draft and Locked On 49ers. So I'm going to give you the guys that were available for the Cowboys here at pick 24. The names include linebacker Nakobe Dean, offensive lineman Zion Johnson, wide receiver Drake London from USC, wide receiver Chris Olave from Ohio State, and Kenyon Green from Texas A&M. So that's the short list
who's available.
Okay. That's who's available. Of those guys, who would you have liked to see the Cowboys pick? I'll read them again. Zion Johnson, Kenyon Green, Nakobe Dean, Chris Olave, Drake London.
Probably Green, I think. I think it also depends on where where we go in the offseason, because if we get rid of Cooper, then Olave definitely sounds like a good pick for me there. I like Zion Johnson a lot as well. I just think that Green probably adds a little bit more versatility there. So probably that's where I would go.
And that's where Eric had the Cowboys picking. And it makes sense, right? The Cowboys traditionally like to draft college tackles, move them inside the guard. They did it with Connor Williams. They did it with Zach Martin. Green has experience playing guard. That's really his best position. But you do like the guy that can play left tackle against Alabama like he did and play a really good game. It makes the most sense to me. Again, is it worth drafting a guard in the first round? I think that's a conversation we can have. Obviously, the Zach Martin pick, worked out really well. But if Green ends up just being in, let's say, above average starter, is that still a good first round pick?
How many of these other guys are going to be more than better than average starter?
Well, it's a good question. It's just if you could find an above average starter at wide receiver or defensive tackle or defensive end, is that more valuable than a left guard? I don't necessarily know. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. How much should we value the left guard position if you're not getting an elite starter?
Well, I think if you're talking about 24, I think I think you're picking the best player. I understand positional value, but I think at that point you're just trying to hit a double and hope for a home run. And I think you can swing big if you want, and positional value still does matter there for sure. But I also think that you're getting a better guard at 24 than you are a defensive end at 24, because the guys will like the value of the guys, push them up high, and the good ones get picked early. So I think that's kind of where I was at, and that's kind of where the Cowboys have been in the past, right? Is that they'd rather pick the best guard than the third defensive end, or you know what I'm saying? So that's kind of been a way that they've drafted, and it's gotten them, it's done well for them. They've hit a lot of their first round picks kind of following that idea.
Does it make you nervous that the history of drafting guards in the end of the first round is a little bit suspect? So here's the list of guards drafted from pick 20 and beyond over the last 3 decades. It's Joshua Garnett for the 49ers, Jermaine Ifedi, Laken Tomlinson, Kevin Zeitler, Danny Watkins, David DeCastro. That's a hit. That's an all-pro guard. Davin Joseph, Ben Grubbs, Kendall Simmons, Mo Collins.
It's a crapshoot at the bottom of the first round anyways. I think honestly you have to take it at an individual level. Like, you have to see, is this guy feel like he's going to be a good fit for our offense? Does he feel like he's going to develop? You can always look back at the history and then either take solace or be afraid of what the previous year's picks at that position have been. They don't always have a very good correlation to how the rest of the players are going to be necessarily.
I don't care about this one because it just so depends on the player. I I didn't love Joshua Garnett. I didn't think he was a first-round player when he got drafted. The 49ers reached on him. It's not a surprise that he didn't turn out, right? Like so, but I remember the 2012 draft, and
We love
Cowboys Twitter in
DeCastro.
general loved David DeCastro, right?
Yeah.
He goes to Pittsburgh, and he turns out to be everything that we thought. So,
but he wasn't great at first. Like, you know what I'm saying? So
he
struggled a little bit early on. So
and I think that should also go into the expectations. Like if the Cowboys do draft Kenyon Green, you can't expect him to be as good as Tyron Smith and Zach Martin right away. And he's not going to solve all their offensive line issues, right?
Yeah. And I mean, look, I think we need to be patient in general with some of these guys, right? If you're looking for someone to come in and be, solid starter plus right away, then go out and get someone in free agency.
Yeah.
Because honestly, like we just look at what happened with Connor Williams. I mean,
exactly.
I thought Connor Williams had a very good and steady development in phase, and Cowboys fans couldn't handle how he played.
Right?
Yeah. And so, if it's the case that we just can't wait, on like a plug and play. I mean, I think he could be a plug and play starter, but if you're looking for a fully formed guy or a guy that's playing on the level of the rest of these offensive linemen, then you probably need to go the veteran free agent route. It's just the truth of the matter. So, I think with offensive linemen, it's difficult. It's a difficult transition, even at guard, because things happen really fast inside, and especially in the NFL. So you're playing with a different level of athlete in the NFL at defensive tackle than you are at college.
I could go on and rant about this, but I really believe in a lot of ways, Tyron Smith, Zach Martin, and Travis Frederick were some of the worst things that happened to Cowboys fans, right?
Yeah.
Because they believe every first-round offensive lineman that you pick should be an all-pro right away. Like they should instantly come in and be among the top 5 or 6 at their positions. And it doesn't work that way. Most teams would love to have Connor Williams' career. Like if they draft a second-round guard, love it. That's exactly what we were hoping for. It might maybe even been better. But because the Cowboy fans and Cowboys front office have such high expectations for their offensive linemen, anything less than a Pro Bowl player is a miss. And that's just not the way that we should really view these guys, right?
The Doug Free syndrome, as I've entitled it.
Yeah.
Honestly, the Doug Free syndrome is something that the Cowboys fans in general just need to get rid of. It's this idea that a very good offensive lineman isn't good enough, that they need to be like all pro in order to be not replacement worthy. And then, the year after you get rid of Doug Free, you really, really miss him. You really, really realize how good he was and what he was doing for this team. And I think that's, kind of a good example.
And I'll even go a little bit more extreme. Like the Cowboys drafted Chaz Green in 2015 in the 3rd round, at the end of the 3rd round. That's what a lot of 3rd and 4th round offensive linemen look like in the NFL, right? Yeah. Now there's teams that do a better job of scheming around bad offensive linemen. The Cowboys did not. But look at Chaz Green's still in the NFL today.
Yeah,
he's still starting for teams because there's just not enough quality offensive linemen. So Cowboy fans think Chaz Green's one of the worst offensive linemen in their history. Is kind of just what you expect at that point.
How many 6'5", 300+ pound athletes are there in the world? There's only so many. So these guys that have any kind of experience that can even look even somewhat like, professional football players, they get chance after chance after chance because there just aren't very many human beings that can do what these guys do.
And I know people are screaming, yeah, well, isn't that why you draft those guys in the 1st round if there's just not that many? It's valid counterpoint, I guess, right?
But it's also, it's also not, I mean, if it was that clear and cut and dry, that they would have success. And that's the other thing, is that you're watching them play almost a different game in the college level.
Yep.
So trying to project them to the next level against people that are exponentially better athletes, especially inside, in my mind, because the defensive tackles especially are just a different animal than they are in college. And you can tell that by the fact that look at what's coming out of college. You only have 1 or 2 first-round interior defensive linemen that are going in the last 4 or 5 years. But those guys are so rare and so different. And that's the kind of guy that you're facing every single week. You're facing one of those guys almost every single week. So it's incredibly difficult.
So if the Cowboys getting back to this mock draft, did they select Kenyon Green in the 1st round, you'd be happy with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a good choice. I like the flexibility. He's a Texas kid. He's played tackle. He's played guard. He can give you some versatility if you need to. I
Feels
like
a
that
double,
selection.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, it feels like a solid making contact with the ball, not screwing it up on the first round.
At pick 24 and maybe not the strongest draft, why not? Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, just get a solid pick because there's just not a ton of great choice out there. So just pick something solid.
Go be more aggressive on day 2 and day 3.
Yeah.
Get a guy that you can plug and play and start in year 1. All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in. Tomorrow we'll do your questions as always. Make sure you send them in to us. You can follow the show at Locked On Cowboys on Twitter. You can download the podcast wherever you can get your podcasts. You can follow Landon at McCool BCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher. We'll see you guys next time.